The billionaire's daughter was born unable to move a single muscle. No one could reach her, until a poor boy appeared and did the unthinkable. The mansion smelled of disinfectant and silence, a thick, dense silence that clung to the walls like dust, a silence that hurt. On the second floor, behind tinted glass windows that filtered light as if the outside world were a threat, there was a white room, white like a hospital, white like forgetting. And in that room, seated in a wheelchair upholstered in gray velvet, sat Emily. She was 6 years old. She didn't speak. She didn't move. Her eyes, enormous, dark, deep as bottomless wells, stared into nothing. Or perhaps they saw everything. No one knew. Her father, Robert Harrison, owner of one of the largest fortunes in the country, had spent millions trying to save her. Specialists from Switzerland, therapists from Japan, experimental clinics in Boston, medical equipment that cost more than an entire house. Nothing worked. Emily remained there, breathing, alive, but absent. Robert stopped believing in science the day a neurologist looked him in the eyes and said, "Your daughter is here, Mr. Harrison, but we don't know where." That sentence broke him. Since then, the mansion became a mausoleum. Employees walked on tiptoe. Lights stayed low. Curtains closed. Everything whispered. Everything feared. Robert spent afternoons sitting in front of Emily with one hand over hers, cold, motionless, perfect as porcelain, and stared out the window seeing nothing. Until one Tuesday in October, when autumn had already painted the trees old gold, the service entrance doorbell rang. It was Sarah. She came with a boy's hand in hers. The boy was 8 years old, brown skin burned by the sun, scraped knees, and a smile that seemed out of place in such a gray world. His name was Noah. Sarah was the new housekeeper, a woman with rough hands and clear eyes, who arrived without references, but with a handwritten recommendation letter from Pastor Williams at the community church. Robert didn't ask much. He needed someone. The house was falling apart on the inside, though it shone like a jewel on the outside. "Sir, I have no one to leave my son with," Sarah said in the interview, with a firm but humble voice. "If you allow me, he won't be a bother. He's quiet. He knows how to stay still." Robert looked at her, then looked at the boy. Noah looked back, without fear, without shame, with those big eyes that seemed to understand everything. "Just keep him quiet," was all Robert said. Sarah nodded, and so, without knowing it, without planning it, without anyone being able to imagine it, Noah entered Emily's life, and everything changed. If this story has already touched your heart in this first minute, subscribe to the channel. Here you'll find stories that heal, inspire, and make you believe in human goodness again. The mansion had 22 rooms. Emily only knew one. Her room was a perfect square, 4 meters by 4, white walls, light marble floor that reflected light like a cold mirror, a hospital bed with chrome rails, a closet full of clothes she never wore, and the wheelchair, always by the window, looking toward the garden she had never touched. Robert entered 3 times a day. At 8 in the morning, with a nurse who gave her liquid breakfast through a feeding tube. At 2 in the afternoon to change her position and prevent bed sores. At 8 in the evening to sit in front of her and talk to her. "It rained today, Emily," he'd say in a low voice, as if speaking to a ghost. "The roses in the garden are blooming. Your mother loved them." Emily didn't respond. Never responded. Her eyes remained fixed. Sometimes she blinked. That was all. Robert had been talking to her for 6 years. 6 years waiting for a sign, a look, a movement, something that would tell him, "I'm here, Dad. I haven't left." But Emily was a body without voice, a presence without movement. And although doctors swore her brain functioned, that she could hear, that perhaps she even understood, no one could prove it. Emily's mother had died in childbirth, a massive hemorrhage, unexpected, brutal, Robert never remarried, never touched another woman, never truly smiled again. His entire life reduced to two things: making money and caring for Emily. But money was useless, and caring for Emily hurt. Because each day that passed, each therapy that failed, each specialist who shook his head, Robert felt he was losing her a little more. And yet, he couldn't give up, because giving up meant accepting his daughter would never return. And that would kill him. Sarah arrived on a Monday. She brought a small suitcase, a cloth bag with Noah's clothes, and an attitude Robert didn't expect: calm. She didn't ask about Emily. She showed no pity. She didn't make those uncomfortable gestures all new employees made when they saw the girl for the first time. She simply nodded, listened to the instructions, and got to work. Noah, for his part, stayed in the kitchen. Sitting in a chair too big for him with his feet dangling, he watched everything with huge, bright eyes. "Can I draw?" he asked. Sarah gave him a paper napkin and a pencil. Noah drew a duck. It wasn't a good drawing. It was clumsy, disproportionate, with legs too long and a crooked beak. But there was something in that duck. Something alive. "Do you like ducks?" asked the cook, an older woman named Martha, who had worked in the house for 15 years. Noah nodded. "I saw one in the river once. It swam in circles. Made me laugh." Martha smiled. It had been years since she'd heard laughter in that house. Not even in the form of a memory. That afternoon, while Sarah cleaned the main hall, Noah got lost. It wasn't intentional. He simply walked. He climbed the marble stairs, touching the polished railing with his fingers. He passed through hallways filled with old paintings, portraits of people he didn't know. He stopped in front of a half-open door and pushed it. There was Emily, sitting in her wheelchair facing the window, with the evening light falling on her face like a golden veil. Noah stood still. He wasn't afraid, just curious. "Hello," he said. Emily didn't move. Noah entered. He walked slowly with soft steps, as if approaching an injured bird. He sat on the floor in front of her and looked at her. "You don't talk?" he asked. "Nothing. I didn't talk much before either," Noah said. "My mom says I was very quiet, but then I learned that talking is okay. Though sometimes it's better to stay quiet and just look." He stayed there, in silence, looking at her, and for the first time in 6 years. Emily's eyes moved. It was imperceptible, a minimal movement, but her pupils shifted toward Noah. Robert entered 5 minutes later. "What are you doing here?" he asked with a hard voice, almost angry. Noah stood up immediately, frightened. "Sorry, sir. I just wanted to meet her." Robert stared at him. He was going to say something severe, something that would set boundaries. But then he saw Emily, and something in her face was different. He couldn't explain it. It wasn't a movement. It wasn't a clear expression. But there was something he hadn't seen in years. "Leave," Robert said, softer this time. Noah ran out. Robert knelt in front of Emily, took her hand, and looked into her eyes. "Are you there, my love?" he whispered. "Are you there?" Emily didn't respond, but something in the air had changed, and Robert felt it. What did Robert see in his daughter's eyes that he hadn't seen in 6 years? The answer is about to break all the rules of this house. Sarah didn't ask what had happened. When Noah came running down the stairs with bright eyes and flushed cheeks, she just hugged him and said, "Don't go upstairs without permission again." Noah nodded. But that night, while they ate dinner in the small room they'd been given in the service wing, he couldn't help but ask, "Mom, why doesn't that girl move?" Sarah put her fork on the plate. She looked at her son with those tired but tender eyes. "Sometimes people get trapped, my love. Not in a prison with bars, but in a prison no one can see." "And how do they get out?" Sarah had no answer. But Noah, with that simple and brilliant logic only children have, said, "Maybe she just needs someone to talk to her, like you do with me when I'm sad." Sarah smiled. She stroked his hair. "Maybe, my love, maybe." The following days were strange. Noah tried to stay away from Emily's room. He really tried. But something called to him. It wasn't morbid curiosity. It wasn't pity. It was connection. That inexplicable feeling that someone, somewhere, needs you to be there. So he started passing by chance in front of the half-open door. Sometimes he'd stand there, looking. Other times he'd enter, just for a moment, just to say, "Hi, Emily, it's me again." And he'd leave. Robert noticed. At first it bothered him. He thought about forbidding entry. He thought about talking to Sarah, about setting strict boundaries. But something stopped him. Maybe it was the expression on Emily's face when Noah was near. Maybe it was the fact that, for the first time in years, someone entered that room without fear, without pity, without that heavy silence everyone carried. Noah entered and talked. He talked about absurd things, about his life on the South Side, about the stray dog that followed him to school, about the time he found a coin on the street and bought ice cream, about how his mom sang while washing clothes. He didn't expect answers. He simply talked, and Emily listened, or at least it seemed so. One afternoon, Noah entered with something in his hands. It was a rubber duck, small, yellow, worn. He'd found it in a box of old toys in the basement. "Look," he said, approaching Emily. "It's like the one I drew. Remember I told you about the duck in the river? Well, this one looks like it." He squeezed the duck. It made a high-pitched, almost ridiculous sound. Quack. Noah laughed. And then Emily blinked. It wasn't a normal blink. It was slower. More conscious. Noah noticed. "Did you like it?" he asked with wide eyes. He squeezed the duck again. Quack. Emily blinked again. Noah felt his heart race. "I'll do it again, okay?" Quack. This time Emily's lips trembled. It was almost imperceptible, as if she wanted to smile, but her body didn't remember how. Noah left the duck in Emily's lap and ran out. "Mr. Harrison! Mr. Harrison!" Robert was in his office, reviewing contracts that didn't matter to him. When Noah entered without knocking, breathing hard and eyes full of emotion, Robert frowned. "What's wrong?" "She heard me. Emily heard me." Robert stood up abruptly. "What?" "I made a sound with a rubber duck and she blinked. And then, I think she wanted to smile." Robert climbed the stairs 2 at a time. He entered Emily's room with his heart in his throat. There she was, still, as always. But the rubber duck was in her lap. Robert picked it up, squeezed it. Quack, nothing. Quack, nothing. Robert felt something inside him break. Again. "No, nothing happened," he murmured. Noah, standing at the door, bit his lip. Maybe it only happens with me," he said quietly. Robert looked at him. There was something in those child's eyes, something pure, something he had lost a long time ago. "Hope. Stay," Robert said with a broken voice. "Stay with her a while." And he left the room. He stayed on the other side of the door, back against the wall, listening. He heard Noah talk. He heard the sound of the duck. And he heard something else, something he hadn't heard in 6 years. A sigh, small, almost inaudible, but it was there. Robert closed his eyes, and for the first time in a long time, he cried. The rubber duck unleashed something no $1 million could buy. But what Noah was about to do, no one saw coming. Robert didn't sleep that night. He stayed sitting in his office with the lights off, staring at nothing. Had he heard right? Had it been real? Or was he just so desperate his mind was inventing signs where there were none? But the sigh, that sigh had been real. He'd felt it in his chest, like a soft blow, like a door opening slightly. At 6 in the morning, without sleep, without shaving, he went up to Emily's room. Noah was already there, sitting on the floor, with the rubber duck in his hand, talking to her in a low voice. And then the dog followed me all the way home. My mom said we couldn't keep him, but I gave him water. He looked so thirsty, you know? Robert stayed in the doorway, watching. Noah hadn't seen him. He kept talking. Sometimes I think animals understand more than people. Like they know when someone is sad. He squeezed the duck. Quack. And then Emily moved her fingers. It was a minimal movement, almost invisible. But Robert saw it. He felt his legs fail. He approached, slowly, as if any sound could break the spell. Noah, he whispered. The boy turned, startled. Sorry, sir, I was just... No, Robert interrupted with a trembling voice. Don't apologize. Keep going. Keep talking. Noah looked at him, confused, but he obeyed. Well, where was I? Oh, right. The dog. His name was Buddy, I think, or at least I called him that. Quack. Emily's fingers moved again. This time it was clearer. Robert knelt in front of his daughter. He took her hand. He felt it. Warm. Emily, he whispered. My girl. Can you hear me? Nothing. But Noah, with that inexplicable intuition of children, said, Maybe she doesn't want to talk yet, sir. Maybe she just wants to listen. Robert looked at him, and for the first time in years, he smiled. You're right. From that day on, Noah became Emily's constant companion. It wasn't planned. There was no formal conversation. It simply happened. Noah brought things to the room. A small bell he found in the kitchen. He'd ring it softly, and Emily would blink. A bottle with water. He'd shake it, and the sound of the liquid moving seemed to calm her. Once he brought a plastic flute he'd bought on the street. He played 3 off-key notes. Emily turned her head. Barely a centimeter, but she did it. Robert, who was watching from the door, felt the world stop. She did it, he whispered. She moved her head. Sarah, who was cleaning the hallway, approached. It's the sound, she said quietly. Children like sound. It wakes them up. Robert looked at her. How do you know? Because my son was like that. When he was born, he cried all the time. Doctors said he had colic, but I discovered that if I sang to him, he'd calm down. Didn't matter what song, just the sound of my voice. Robert nodded, slowly. What if, he started to say but stopped. What if what, sir? What if Emily just needed this, sounds, voices, life? Sarah said nothing. It wasn't necessary. One afternoon, Noah had an idea. He was in the garden looking at the pool. It was an enormous pool. Crystal clear water, with underwater lights and polished stone edges. But no one used it. Noah approached. He put his hand in. The water was warm, pleasant. He looked toward the second-floor window. There was Emily, sitting, looking outside. And then he thought, what if she could feel the water? He ran inside, climbed the stairs, entered the room without knocking. Mr. Harrison, can I take Emily to the pool? Robert, who was sitting next to his daughter, looked at him as if he'd just spoken in another language. What? The pool. The water. I think she'd like it. Noah, she can't swim. She can't move. I know, but she can feel. She can float. I'll hold her. Robert was going to say no. He was going to explain it was dangerous, that Emily might get scared, that they didn't know how her body would react. But then he looked at his daughter and saw something in her eyes, something he'd never seen. Curiosity. Okay, Robert said, almost not believing it. But I'm coming with you. And if anything goes wrong, nothing will go wrong, Noah said with a certainty only a child can have. They took Emily down in her wheelchair. It was a slow process, delicate. Robert carried her with extreme care, as if she were made of glass. He sat her on the pool's edge. Noah was already in the water with his arms extended. Pass her to me, sir. Robert hesitated, but something in Noah's gaze was pure confidence. He lowered Emily slowly. The water touched her feet, and then Emily gasped. It was a small sound, high-pitched, surprised. Robert almost pulled her out of the water immediately, but Noah said, "Wait, look at her eyes." Robert looked. Emily's eyes were open, fully open. They weren't staring at nothing. They were looking at the water. Noah held her carefully. He let her float. And for the first time in 6 years, Emily moved her arms. No one was prepared for what happened next. And when Emily opened her mouth, the world of that mansion changed forever. Emily floated. Her arms moved slowly, clumsily, as if they were learning for the first time what movement was. The water held her, embraced her, made her feel light. Noah guided her gently, talking to her the whole time. "See? It's not scary. Water is a friend. My mom says water has memory, that if you speak kindly to it, it takes care of you." Robert was kneeling at the pool's edge, hands trembling, unable to look away. "Emily," he whispered, "my love." And then Emily did something no one expected. She opened her mouth and cried. It wasn't a silent cry. It wasn't a single tear. It was a sob, deep, heartbreaking, as if 6 years of silence broke all at once. Robert threw himself into the water. He took her in his arms, pulled her out, pressed her against his chest. "It's okay, my girl. It's okay. Dad's here. Dad's here." Emily cried, and cried, and cried, and Robert cried with her. Sarah came running from the house. She stopped seeing the scene. She put a hand to her mouth. Noah got out of the water, confused, scared. "Did I do something wrong? I just wanted—" Sarah hugged him. "No, my love. You did something beautiful." That night, Emily slept differently, not with that empty, heavy sleep as always. She slept peacefully. Robert stayed sitting next to her bed, holding her hand, watching her as if she'd just been born. "Thank you," he whispered to nothing. "Thank you." He didn't know who he was talking to. Maybe the universe. Maybe his wife's memory. Maybe just himself. But he felt it. Something had changed. The following days were a whirlwind. Robert hired a new medical team. Not the cold specialists from before. This time, he sought occupational therapists, physical therapists specialized in neurological trauma, child psychologists. But the most important of all was Noah, because Emily responded to him. When Noah entered the room, her eyes followed him. When Noah spoke, she listened. And on a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks after the pool episode, Emily said her first word. "No, ah." It was barely a whisper, broken, imperfect, but it was a word. Noah was sitting on the floor drawing with crayons. When he heard his name, he looked up abruptly. Did you say my name?" Emily looked at him, with those enormous eyes, and her lips trembled. "No, ah!" Noah screamed. "Mr. Harrison! Mr. Harrison, she talked!" Robert came running. He knelt in front of Emily. "What did you say, my love? What did you say?" Emily looked at him, and with visible effort, with every muscle in her face working, she said, "Da-dee." Robert collapsed. He covered his face with his hands and cried like he hadn't cried since his wife's funeral. Sarah, who had come up hearing the screams, stood at the door, crying too. Noah approached Emily and took her hand. "You did it," he said with an enormous smile. "You did it, Emily." And Emily, with that immense effort that meant each movement, smiled. But not everything was light. One afternoon, while Robert reviewed Emily's old medical documents, looking for something that explained her improvement, he found something that shouldn't be there. A sealed envelope, tucked between lab reports. He opened it. Inside was a dossier, pages and pages of clinical reports, from a clinic in Switzerland, and what he read destroyed him. Experimental Protocol Number 47, Invasive Neurological Stimulation in Pediatric Patient. He read more, and with each word, his stomach churned. They had subjected Emily to experimental procedures, without his full consent, without informing him of the real risks. They had applied electric shocks to her skull. They had injected unapproved substances, all under the promise of activating her brain. But the only thing they had done was hurt her, and the signature at the end of the document was his. Robert felt the world collapse. He had authorized it. He had. In a moment of desperation, he had signed without reading carefully. He had trusted the doctors. He had believed they were saving his daughter, but they had tortured her. He stood up. He walked to Emily's room. She was awake, looking out the window. Robert knelt in front of her. "Forgive me," he whispered. "Forgive me, my love. I didn't know. I just wanted to save you. But I hurt you. I hurt you so much." Emily looked at him, with those eyes that now shone, that now lived, and with a voice still fragile, still broken but real, she said, "It's okay." Robert hugged her, and swore in that moment that he would seek justice. What Robert was about to discover would not only save Emily, but would expose a truth that would change hundreds of lives. But first, he would have to face the system that almost destroyed his daughter. Robert didn't sleep for 3 days. He locked himself in his office with the documents. He called lawyers, private investigators, journalists specialized in medical ethics. What he discovered was worse than he imagined. The clinic in Switzerland hadn't only experimented on Emily. There were hundreds of cases, children with cerebral palsy, with severe autism, with neurological damage, all subjected to invasive, dangerous procedures, not authorized by any official medical board, and all under the guise of cutting-edge treatments. Parents signed, desperate, trusting, like him. Robert felt a crushing weight in his chest, guilt, rage, helplessness, but also determination. "I'm going to destroy them," he said aloud, alone in his office with clenched fists. "I'm going to destroy them." The story reached the media 2 weeks later. Robert had contacted an investigative journalist. He gave him all the documentation, every report, every signature, every procedure. The headline appeared on the front page of the country's most important newspaper. "Elite clinic illegally experimented on disabled children for years. Billionaire father exposes the scandal." The entire country was shocked. Social media exploded. Parents from all over the world started sharing their stories. Children who had been through the same clinic, who had suffered the same procedures, and many of them had gotten worse. The government opened an official investigation. The clinic closed its doors, and Robert became the voice of hundreds of families who had never had one. But the most important thing to him wasn't public justice. It was Emily. Emily was changing, not overnight, not like in movies, but she was changing. Each day she said a new word. Each week she moved a different muscle. The therapists were amazed. They said it was a unique case, that the combination of sensory stimulation, emotional connection, and time had done what medicine couldn't. But Robert knew the truth. It wasn't therapy. It was Noah. Noah, who kept visiting her every day, who read her stories, who showed her drawings, who made her laugh with silly jokes. Noah, who never saw her as a patient, just as a friend. One afternoon, Emily did something no one expected. She was sitting in her wheelchair in front of a small table Robert had put in her room. On the table were paints, brushes, paper. Noah had suggested she try painting. He said he liked it because you didn't have to talk to say things. Emily picked up a brush, with clumsy fingers, with slow movements. She dipped it in blue paint and drew a line. It was irregular, shaky, but it was a line. Robert, watching from the doorway, felt something in his chest expand. "Keep going, my love," he whispered. "Keep going." Emily drew another line, and another, and another, and little by little on that white paper, a face appeared. It wasn't perfect. It was abstract, almost childlike, but it was a face, with big eyes and a smile. Robert approached. He looked at the drawing. "Who is it?" he asked with a soft voice. Emily looked at him, and with that voice still fragile, but increasingly firm, she said, "No." Ah. Months passed. Emily kept progressing. She could already walk with help. She could hold short conversations. She could eat on her own. But the most important thing was that she smiled. The mansion, which once seemed a mausoleum, now had life. There was laughter, music, colors. Robert had hired Sarah as house administrator. She was no longer just an employee. She was family. And Noah had become the brother Emily never had. One day, Robert called them to his office. Sarah and Noah entered, nervous. "Is something wrong, sir?" Sarah asked. Robert smiled. He took out some papers from his desk. "I want to make you a proposal." He extended the documents. Sarah read them, her eyes filled with tears. "Sir, this is a legal adoption," Robert said. "I want Noah to officially be Emily's brother. I want this house to be your home. I want you to be family." Sarah couldn't speak. She just cried. Noah, for his part, looked at Robert with those bright eyes. "Does that mean Emily is my real sister?" "Yes," Robert said, kneeling in front of him. "Real." Noah smiled, and then asked, "Can I tell her?" "Go." Noah ran upstairs. He entered Emily's room, who was painting another picture. Emily, guess what?" Emily looked at him with a smile that was now easier, more natural. "What?" "Now we're siblings. For real. With papers and everything." Emily put down the brush. She looked at him. And with that voice that sounded stronger each day, she said, "We always were siblings." Noah hugged her, and Emily, with movements still slow but determined, hugged back. 3 months later, Emily received an invitation. A national event on the rights of children with disabilities, organized by a foundation born from the clinic scandal. They asked her to speak. Robert hesitated. He didn't want to expose her. He didn't want them to see her as a symbol. But Emily wanted to go. "I want to speak," she said. And Robert, with tears in his eyes, nodded. The day of the event, the auditorium was full. There were hundreds of people, families, doctors, activists, journalists. Emily went up on stage in her wheelchair. She didn't need it all the time anymore, but it still gave her security. Noah was seated in the front row, next to Sarah, next to Robert. Emily took the microphone. She took a deep breath and spoke. "Hello, my name is Emily." Her voice trembled, but it was clear. "For 6 years, I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. My body. Everyone thought I wasn't there, but I was there." The auditorium was in complete silence. "I was trapped in a place where no one could reach." She paused. She looked at Noah. "Until a boy did." Noah wiped tears with the back of his hand. "He didn't save me with medicine. He saved me with love, with sounds, with presence." Emily took a deep breath. "There are many children, like me, trapped, and people treat them like broken things. But we're not broken. We just need someone to truly listen to us." There was a long silence, and then the entire auditorium stood up. They applauded, they cried, they shouted her name. Emily smiled, and Noah from the first row shouted, "That's my sister." Robert hugged him, and cried, and laughed, because for the first time in 6 years, his daughter was free. But this story doesn't end here. The best was still to come, 7 years later. The mansion was no longer white. The second-floor walls were full of color. Paintings painted by Emily hung everywhere. Deep blues, bright yellows, deep reds. The room that was once a hospital room was now an art studio, with brushes organized in glass jars, with canvases stacked against the wall, with a huge window that let sunlight in unfiltered. Emily was 13 years old. She no longer used a wheelchair. She walked with a cane decorated with gold paint. A cane she had painted herself. Noah was 15. He studied at the same school as Emily. He accompanied her every day, no longer because she needed it, but because they were siblings, really. One spring afternoon, Emily was sitting in the garden. In front of her was a large canvas. She was painting something new, something that had been on her mind for months. Robert approached. He carried 2 cups of coffee. He gave one to Emily. "What are you painting?" he asked. Emily smiled. That smile that was now easy, natural. Us. Robert looked at the canvas. There, in soft strokes and vibrant colors, they were. Him, Emily, Sarah, Noah. Not as separate individuals, but as a single figure, intertwined, connected. "It's beautiful," Robert said with a broken voice. Emily looked at him. "Dad, do you remember when I couldn't speak?" Robert nodded. "Every second. I heard everything, every word you said to me, every time you cried, every time you sat with me in silence." Robert felt tears coming. "I just wanted to be with you." "And you were," Emily said. "You always were." Robert hugged her, and she hugged back, with strong arms, with life. That night the family ate together, at the big dining room table, the same table that used to be empty, cold, silent. Now there was laughter, conversation, warmth. Sarah had cooked. Noah had set the table. Emily had brought flowers from the garden, and Robert simply watched. He watched his family, his chosen family, his family of the heart. "What are you thinking about, Dad?" Emily asked. Robert smiled. "That everything changed the day a boy walked through that door." Noah laughed. "I just wanted to meet her." "And you saved her?" Robert said. "No," Emily interrupted, with that firm voice she now had. "We all saved each other." There was a comfortable silence, the kind that only exists when people feel at home. "You know what's the craziest thing about all this?" Noah said, breaking the silence. "I came here thinking I'd see a huge mansion full of incredible things, and the only thing I found incredible was her." He pointed at Emily. She blushed. "Don't be sappy." "It's true," Noah insisted. "Everyone thought you were broken. But I just saw a girl who needed a friend." Emily looked at him, with those eyes that now shone with their own light. "And you needed a sister." Noah smiled. "Yes, that too." Months later, Emily gave another speech, this time at a university, in front of medical students, future doctors. She spoke about her story, about the procedures she was subjected to, about how medicine, in its eagerness to fix, sometimes forgets to listen. And she ended with a phrase that went viral on social media. "Science didn't cure me, presence did. And maybe that should be the first lesson a doctor learns." The video of her speech was shared millions of times, and Emily became a voice for those who have no voice. But for her, the most important thing wasn't the speeches, or the recognition, or the newspaper articles. The most important thing was coming home, to that mansion that was no longer cold, to that family that was no longer broken, and painting. Painting until her hands hurt. Painting stories, emotions, colors she couldn't see before. Painting because she could, because she was alive, because she was free. One night, before bed, Noah entered Emily's studio. She was in front of a canvas, painting again. "Don't you ever get tired?" Noah asked, sitting on the floor. Emily smiled without stopping painting. "No, because each brush stroke is a word I couldn't say before." Noah nodded. He stayed silent for a while. Then he said, "Do you remember the rubber duck?" Emily stopped. She looked at him. "Always. I still have it," Noah said. "It's in my room. Sometimes I squeeze it, and I remember that day, when everything changed." Emily put down the brush. She sat next to him. "Nothing changed, Noah." "What? We're still us." You're still the boy who talked to me when no one else did, and I'm still the girl who listened to you." Noah smiled. "Yeah, I guess so." Emily rested her head on his shoulder. "Thank you for not being afraid of me. Thank you for not giving up." They stayed like that, in silence, with that kind of silence that doesn't hurt anymore, a silence full of peace. And outside, in the garden, under the moonlight, the rubber duck was still in the pool, floating, like a small reminder that sometimes what saves isn't expensive. What saves isn't perfect. What saves is human, a boy, a look, a presence, and the decision, simple but powerful, to see someone not as a problem to solve, but as a person to love. Because in the end, it's not mansions or money or science that heals us. It's love, connection, the courage to approach when everyone else walks away. And that's priceless. If this story touched your heart, don't leave without subscribing. Here you'll find more stories that will remind you why it's worth believing in human goodness. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that miracles exist, and that sometimes they come disguised as barefoot children with enormous smiles. Like this if you believe in the power of presence. Comment which part of the story made you cry. And above all, remember, we all have a Noah inside. And we can all be the voice that awakens someone from silence. See you in the next story. Thank you for being here.